Well, there's different ways to collect art. A lot of people do it just because they love it and it's fun. And like both of them said, it's a beautiful thing to have. Other things are financial reasons. People collect art for financial gain and long-term gain. A lot of the historical works or the current top painters that you have are collected sometimes sadly on purpose just for their financials. But I'm hoping that most of our collectors do collect because they find something special, as you both said, in one of the works. And as a beginning collector, and if you haven't started an art collection yet, I would say definitely go to the museums, definitely look at all the art magazines. There are so many different genres, and you don't know if you haven't studied art which one you like. Maybe you remember a class where Monet really stood out to you, or maybe you've discovered the Diebenkorns in San Francisco. But either way, find out what you like by trying different things. I mean, there are people that are attracted to bold color and modernism and don't want to think too much. There's other people that are fascinated by realism and the fact that they can make something look 3D and realistic using colored mud and some animal hairs on a stick. I mean, it's fascinating. And so that never the collector never loses that fascination. They just marvel at it. And that drives them to find another one and how they did it. And it's a very exciting process for them. But I definitely think that all of our collectors have a passion for art. Even the ones that are just buying it as a gift, they're passionate about getting a gift for their mom. So find what makes you passionate. At our gallery, we like mixing the genres. So I like having a little bit of modernism and realism now. We think that the genres are being mixed anyway. So when you're building collection, just remember to look at all the different places you can, magazines, galleries, attend shows. Even if a gallery seems snobby, just go to the show and talk to the gallery about the art. They're supposed to educate you and then help you find what you're interested in and talk to you about it.
I would like to add to something that Vanessa had said is art can be very much about asking questions or making statements. And there's some art that's going to really ask a lot of questions and really make you think. And then there's some art that is much more restful and that isn't going to challenge you in a particularly hard way. And some people like to be surrounded by art that challenges them. And some people like to be around art that comforts them. And again, that is something that you will discover as you are learning about your relationship with this particular form of human expression. You know, an artist is someone who is interpreting meaning that they have found in the world. And that meaning can contribute to the meaning of your own life. And by asking questions or making statements and yeah, so
if I could just add to that, to specifically what Vanessa said about how you should look to a gallery to educate you, and I think that is actually what the role of a gallery is, because I think a good gallery will welcome you in and spend the time to teach you what all of these different movements are, what the different types of art are, what the media are, and hopefully create a community of art and art interested people. And you know, we still believe in, and it's been difficult during COVID obviously, but we still believe in the importance of the sort of the in-person interaction. And just the experience of having a reception and people coming in and looking and talking about art is a wonderful experience that goes along with the thrill of collecting art itself. So I do recommend that as people are out there thinking about building a collection, that they go and you know, approach galleries with an open mind and ask questions.
And that kind of leads in to this next topic a bit, because, you know, there are a lot of questions sometimes that people with their collections want to know why they should work with an interior designer and a gallery. And I do think, Richard, that part of it is that educational aspect and learning about the art. So I'd love to hear, Vanessa, your thoughts on that end of things to kind of continue the conversation.
That's what I wrote down in my notes, that, I mean, if the gallery is doing their job correctly, they are supposed to educate their clients on the work they're buying. Some do it better than others. Some spend more time on that. Others are more salesmen. But for example, we pride ourselves in educating the collectors so much that they actually should be able to start going off on their own and knowing what they think is good art based on what they like. And we've taught them how to do. And it's exciting to see collectors that, you know, come back and say, okay, here's a piece I found, what do you think? And I'm very proud of them that they figured it out. So the gallery should offer that aspect of it. Also, the interior designer, I mean, you can work with both, you can work with neither, and having both, you know, just depends. The interior designer usually has a team of people that will hang the painting for you, which is great. Sometimes the galleries offer that, sometimes they don't. But an interior designer actually has a team to place the work, which is kind of an important aspect to think about, especially if you're actually hiring a designer for a lot of money and they're redoing a room, for example. Yes, I would go to the gallery first to talk about the kind of work, and then maybe bring the interior designer in and say, do you think this works with what you're doing? Since it's a, like you guys have said, a team effort to kind of create this. But most of all, you don't have to work with either. If you know what you like and know how to hang it, that's great. I hope I've answered the question. I think framers also play a good role in this, because a framer will also have the team to hang it. A framer sometimes actually has interior designers on hand, and we work with a couple here in California where the framer plays a bigger role than any interior designer. So between me and the frame shop, we have everything covered. So I don't have to have interior designers step in and do a big job for us. So it depends.
Yeah, and Richard, do you have anything to add to that on your end? Because I know you do both interior design work and have the gallery as well.
Yeah, so I should do full disclosure here. My husband is an interior designer, and so as a former architect, you know, I spend a lot of time at both sides of this question, both mainly, you know, my role in the plate mark design firm is really just advisory at this point. But I do own a gallery, and so we'll often work together with the client in selecting art that goes, you know, with the design. I think that one of the things that is an observation that I've had is that there are certain people that the collection is primary, and so they'd rather spend 50,000 on a painting than 50,000 on a sofa. And then you have the people that want to, you know, have 50,000 for the sofa and 50,000 for the painting. But I think that it's really about knowing who your clients are, and, you know, what they're working, you know, what they're, you know, what's driving them. I think that, you know, certain, you know, back again to the education, I think an interior designer has to educate the client in interior design in the same way that the gallery needs to educate the client in the artwork. And when they both go together, it's magical. There's some images that'll be shown later that are often surprising to us, that are where we see a work that we sold featured in a magazine that an interior designer had put together, even though we knew we were working with them. But anyway, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And Francis, I know on your end of things, you're in there photographing art and interiors. I'm sure there are some things that you see from both ends.
Absolutely. what I feel a gallery or an interior designer, someone who, when helping you place the art, that's a very important part of collecting, is how do you place what you own? And I once was in a home photographing incredible collection, beautiful interiors. It was amazing. I found out that most of the placement of the art, he did in general, a fine job, was done by the houseman. You know, it wasn't an interior designer. It wasn't the gallery that had placed the art. And a lot of the art wasn't talking with each other. Like, let's say there's a portrait, a beautiful portrait of a woman in cool colors, and everything else are Western scenes in warm colors. And it was very difficult. And it just took moving in a painting of the Northern Lights to bring the portrait of the woman in and bridge between all that Western stuff and the portrait of the woman in blue, because they both, Northern Lights, blue sky at night, and then the woman had a blue background wearing a blue dress. And that's the sort of thing that an interior designer or a gallery can help you with, is integrating things so that it isn't just about a work here, a work here, a work there, that you are creating a harmony, a story of how does the artwork and how does the room, the other objects in the room, how do they all work together? And along with that, years ago, I'd worked in an interior design firm, and there was an art consultant working there. And she always had said, no, you want simple upholstery, some bright throw pillows, and then you've got art on the walls. And it wasn't until I was in a particular home, this, again, an incredible collection, but the upholstery was kind of busy. And it was very interesting. It was harder to see the art because of the busyness of the upholstery. And they prided themselves on their art collection. That's what they wanted to show off. And so they asked for some advice, and I said, get a modernist rug, simplify the upholstery, and then the artwork on the walls will shine even more. And that's the sort of thing that an interior designer or a gallery should be able to help you with, those sort of decisions.
Yeah, and that kind of moves into our next topic, which is talking about the advice for how and where artwork can be displayed. Our panelists will talk a little bit about each topic, and then we're going to start getting into some of the imagery and examples for this. You know, Francis, I'd love for you to continue a little bit on that, because you started talking about just beginning to incorporate the art in the home. But, you know, is there advice for how and where it can be displayed, and just starting that placement of those pieces?
Yeah, it's an adventure. I guess that's what I would say. I mean, this gets back to what Richard had said. What is the primary goal of a room? Is the room meant to show off the art collection? Is it meant simply to be comfortable? Is it meant to show off wealth, good taste? You know, there are all these different things that a room can do. And and hopefully they can do them all at one time. And that's you know what, let me think on that a little bit. I would like to come back. I'd like to hear what Richard and—
Of course. Vanessa, I'd love for you to add to this.
Sure, I'll give us a little structure for the discussion, because I have notes saying that, you know, there's no rules necessarily. People say, well, what are the rules for decorating? And I mean, yes, there are rules. You can buy a million different books on interior design and the colors and things. But in general, everybody breaks the rules, you know, just like in fine art, we have all these rules and we all break them. There's certain things that we go by, you know, that are pretty much, you know, here's facts, you know, your favorite work usually goes in the room that you're in the most. And most people, that's the living room or the dining room. But for me, for example, it's in my office and the kitchen because I'm a mother. So, you know, that's one thing. You don't want to put nudes in the public area. That is something that's intimate and goes in the bathroom or the bedroom. There's certain things like this. The office, I usually decorate with calm paintings or things that can help me focus, not things that are loud and distracting. Again, walls, I would say, yes, you can put paintings always on walls, but for example, like what we've done here, incorporating bookshelves and different things is another way to display your work, because you asked us how to display the work as well. Sculpture can go on a shelf also on the wall if it's a thin sculpture, or it can go on a table, of course, or its own pedestal, which makes it show off even more. Again, I'm just rattling off some different basic design techniques that you would find in books and that we all learn. No watercolors in the bathroom because they will bleed. The steam in the room will make them, even with glass, lose pigment and it would drip. Sometimes you can put those watercolors nowadays in direct sun because of the pigments of the modern technology has gotten so good, but you'd have to check and make sure that the artist has used pigment safe watercolors. Otherwise, no watercolors in bright sunlight is another thing. Oil paintings should be able to go in sunlight nowadays also because the pigments are so strong, also the varnishes that artists are using today. So, you know, you'll want to address that. That is something to think about when you're hanging work in your house, the lighting, the atmosphere, make sure it's safe depending on what it is. And some people just don't know these basic things. We also talked about stacking. Salon hanging or hanging two paintings on top of each other in areas. It's getting more and more popular, especially for collectors who love work and they want to create these little vignettes where there's a story being told about one painting on top of the other. We usually use a heavier painting on the bottom. It just sits better and it doesn't feel like it's going to be top heavy. So these are some actual rules that you can use from what we have learned. Another thing is if you're going to salon hang, which is multiple works on one wall, it's not really important on the outside of it where they end and if they have to be all in one box. But what is important is the space in between them should be pretty universal. You don't want to have a huge space between some paintings and then a tiny space between others. It's just visually not as inviting and you tend to not be able to look at the work itself. You just notice the different cracks in between. So we use about 2 inches between every artwork when we use salon hanging. So that should give you some structure. I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for, but those are some rules that we use and some things that would be helpful for any beginner starting a collection.
I would like to add to the idea of stacking. I once visited this apartment in New York City and everything was salon style. Just this, and the man, he had been a publisher during the 1920s and the 1930s. And he had known all these artists, and it was an incredible collection of American modernism. Everywhere there was art stacked salon style. The only place where there wasn't art was above the fireplace. And the reason that was because he wanted to give the eye a resting place. And that is something to think about when you have a big collection and when you're creating a room and figuring out where things will go. What's great about stacking is that, yes, you can stack 2 works and there might be a nice space between that and the next stack or the next large piece. And just so that the eye can wander, rest, look, and it creates a sense of being able to discover the room and not having it all just right there, instead of like piece, 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 all at the same level, like it were a gallery. It's important to have some resting space. And what a great thing that you have enough art that you need to think about having resting space. That'd be a wonderful thing.
So I'd like to add to a few of the things that Vanessa was saying, or reiterate. Obviously, you do need to be aware of what the media is and what the light conditions are, particularly with watercolor and photography. I happen to collect photography, and most of the photography goes in a powder room that has no natural light in it. I would say that I might be breaking some of your rules, Vanessa, because I have nudes all over my house.
There's no rules. Those are just some guidelines.
But I do think that artwork speaks to each other. And so I think that when you're placing works on the wall, it's often useful to put them on the floor next to each other and see how the relationships work. And that can also be an exciting way of thinking about the artwork, and you might discover things that you hadn't seen before. But it's definitely, it's also, something that I recommend to people too is don't be afraid to change what's on the wall. Just because you want to live with it for now, in 6 months, you can put something else there. So.
Yeah, definitely. And Richard, I'll move to one of your.
Just wanted to say one thing.
Oh,
Really. So the again, in terms of, I often feel that when you're looking to place artwork, if there's a lot of space around, it sometimes can be good to engage the work of art with an architectural feature so that it's just not floating off on its own. And in a small apartment, I did some art placement, and the hallway from the living, you just walk through a short hallway into the bedroom, and I placed artwork around there so that when you're walking in, you're experiencing this artwork, and you can look at it when you're in the living room, but then otherwise in the living room, there's a fair bit of resting space. And this is an area, so it created an area of a lot of stimulation. And I think that is something to think about. Again, we got into, or I mentioned earlier, there's artwork that asks questions, and there's artwork that simply comforts you. And when it comes to your home, how much stimulation do you want? If you want a lot of stimulation, then maybe you might paint your living room red. Some people would rather just have a powder room be red because it's a bright, stimulating color, and you don't want to spend a huge amount of time around that. That's how some people see that. Though some people want red walls in the living room and tons of art. And so that's something to think about, is just what do you want to see? How much stimulation do you want to have in a particular space? And that will help you figure out how you're going to place the art. So.
Yeah, definitely. And, this kind of leads in a little bit here because, this image that we're showing, this is one that Richard had provided us, and, it's leading into a stairwell or on a, just like a kind of the little landing point of a stairwell. And I just think it's so interesting because there are places of artwork where art can go that you may not necessarily think about as well in terms of where you should be hanging things. I know, Richard, what would you want to tell us about kind of what's happening here and just the design of the space?
So when I submitted these images, I was, sharing examples that I thought were good uses of placement of art in homes. And full disclosure, this is actually my home. And so it was conceived as the home of an interior designer and an art dealer. So everything was sort of designed for and around the art. The interesting thing about this particular slide And what I think makes it so successful is the niche that has the sculpture and the painting in it. But that was actually an accident, because during the renovations, they discovered a cavity in the wall that we could take. And so we decided to make it into a sculpture nook. This is a stair that goes up to the second floor, and that whole wall is covered floor to ceiling with paintings now. And the interesting thing is the project was finished about 7 or 8 years ago, and I look at it now, and there's so much more art in this little space right now than there is in this photo. But I think that, I mean, obviously not everyone is a designer themselves and an art dealer themselves. So it's you know, not something for everyone, but we really enjoy having a space that lends itself, you know, to art display. So
Wonderful. And then
It's very hard.
mhm.
I like it very much.
yeah.
Yeah.
I should credit Michael Lee with this photograph.
Wonderful.
He's a great photographer for interiors in Boston.
Wonderful. And kind of leading in to something Vanessa had started talking about earlier, are these places that aren't necessarily your wall to display art. And a lot of times you will see it in unconventional places. Vanessa, could you kind of talk a little bit more about that?
This can be done with something that's on purpose. You can purposefully buy a bookshelf or these different shelvings from, you know, West Elm or something, and think about placing them instead of putting just one big piece of art like you see on the left. You can actually put the shelves there instead and put many pieces. Therefore, if you're a collector, it's nice to have a little gem shelf such as these. We've done those for a few different clients, and it's fun to unite them with and without frames, as you see there, and with old books. And then the other one, you just don't want to get too busy. So you want something, we talk about resting the eye. So the big piece on the wall next to the busy bookshelf with all the little gems and trinkets and paintings is something nice. You don't want to have the shelves next to the bookshelf, probably. It's probably too much. So that's what we've done with these two here. And that way they can read their art books and then look at their art, and they all get displayed together.
Wonderful. And then this is an image that actually Frances had took. And one of the things that we had started touching on a little bit was about the different mediums of artwork, and and how the medium dictates where it can be placed in the home. Is there anything that we might not have really dived into that is important to mention from those topics? Because I know there's also historic works as well, and works on paper and prints, and just different things. If there are places that you have to think about in how you place them and where they go.
Yes. One of the things, this might be a rule, it depends on how dangerously you're willing to live, that if you have a high traffic area, you might want to have things that are under glass, more likely than to have an exposed oil painting. Just if it's high traffic area, sometimes accidents happen. That's more likely in traffic is when an accident is more likely to happen. So that's something to think about. And yeah, I mean, gosh, being in a home with equipment, for me, with all this artwork around, can be a very fraught situation. I once was in a home photographing, and there were things on the walls, but there was just art strewn everywhere, leaning up against the walls. And I had to be in there. And we're talking, it was a collection of pinup art, amazing pinup paintings from the 1950s. And I had to negotiate these rooms with expensive paintings. I'm trying to back up. It's so I am very aware of things that can happen with art, and just that's something to think about when you're placing. What's the worst thing that can happen here, and how likely is that to happen? So that's something I think about.
Richard, did you have anything to add, or that we might not have talked about?
Well, I appreciate Francis's comment about the art all over the place. But no, I'm in agreement with everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, wonderful. Now, we started talking a little bit about creating a gallery wall or a salon wall. This is another photo that Francis took, and we actually have a question about, in terms of how close to the ceiling should you go if you're doing a salon hanging on one wall? Should you fill it? Should it be a bunch of different sized works? What is that approach?
Vanessa, I think, didn't you have you had an example?
Well, if I was going to look at this wall, I get very distracted. I don't mind the different sizes, but just if you want my opinion, I would probably have combined them with using, if you can, similar frames, so that, again, the frames and the spaces where they are doesn't distract you. You're able to enjoy each piece as you look at it, and it kind of would unify the group. I know that's not always possible, but as far as design, that's what I would do. And definitely not too close to the ceiling. I would do 6 to 10 inches down. You just need your eye level to be able to rest and go away from the work, and they're a little bit low to the couch, but I like how there's small ones and stacks, and I like the different combinations they've created here. I would just try to unify them a little bit better somehow with maybe some frames,
One of the things that I think is useful when you're thinking about salon hanging is aligning center lines. So using center lines, and I think that if, for example, if the top row had a center line, all the center lines were aligned, I think it would be a little bit more comfortable to the eye.
More restful, yeah.
And it's just a trick that you learn when you hang art a lot. But I'm a big fan of salon style hanging. And I think you can do really interesting things with it. And, if I had my druthers, my entire apartment would be like that wall, but I'm only allowed to have 1 or 2 things on a wall, other than the big wall. So
I'm just wondering if the Dykstra picture, were you able to get that in, Rochelle?
Yes, yeah, we'll talk about that one in a little bit.
Right. So that's a salon wall that I'd like to talk about. So yeah, no, it's this is a wonderful collection of particularly Texan modernism, and it really was a pleasure to be in this house, and just the care with which the collector had collected Texas modernism. And there's a group in Texas they collect all art by Texan artists, and I've been to 2 homes of these group members, and it's really been a pleasure because American modernism is one of my favorite schools of American painting, and so it's wonderful to sort of see this combination of a Western motif as fed through a modern aesthetic. So,
and we're getting another follow-up too, and I think that we talked about it a little bit, but in terms of kind of the outside lines, should it be something to have those lined up and just kind of have the mix of sizes kind of fit more in a square? Or is it really up to the collector? And this one is everybody has their own style for things, I think, but are there certain rules to follow?
Well, I mean, I think perhaps one might consider issues of gravity. Vanessa had mentioned about larger paintings. I can't remember. I think she tends to prefer larger paintings below a painting. But so, if you were to be hanging a salon wall, you might think of sort of centrifugal force, sort of larger pieces on the inside and then moving toward the outside, having smaller pieces, and there's more of a jagged edge because you can play with the edge more and have the inside be more structured and the edge can be jagged and more playful.
One of the things that I would suggest to someone who wants to do a wall like this is that they get large sheets of brown paper and lay out the placement of the artwork on the floor and move it around before you make any final decisions. And I think that it's so dependent on what the artwork is, what the frames are, what the sizes are. I think to the person that was asking about should the outside lines be lined up, I think you would want to only have matching frames if that were the case. And so I've seen instances, in sort of, this to me obviously reflects someone who's really about being a collector, I think, than placing it in interiors as an interior design person, because there's some very nice paintings in there. Mm-hmm. And I think that it depends on, it really depends on what the artwork is and, how it all works together.
And we're also being asked if there is an approach to start placing it. That should be considered first color, size, subject, scale, or is it really, is there something in there? I know Vanessa or Richard or Greg.
We usually do what Francis said and put the bigger ones in the middle first and then kind of let it go out from there. So we do that most of the time because it tends to be more pleasing to the eye. There isn't rules, as we said, but I do that too. We take, not on the floor, but pieces of brown paper that are exactly the size of the painting, and we put them on the wall and we try different things. And I do think that what Richard was saying earlier about each group usually has a center line where you hang the work around. It can be 3 center lines and then they all line up, So there are different things. We'd have to take it case by case though. In general, if you want to walk away from this with rules, it's larger paintings in the middle, smaller paintings on the outside, try to match the frames. But again, like Richard said, this is the case of a beautiful collector in love with his work and probably adding to the wall, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yes, you could. I just wanted to, when there's something about trapped white space and how when I'm taking a photograph of a room, one of the things I'm trying to think about is where's the place that has greatest contrast, because that's where the eye is going to go, to the place of greatest contrast. And so that's something to think about. It's like, I would have to have an illustration to be able to talk about it. Something to think about, trapped white space. So.
And kind of going into that, are there particular design elements that are important for collectors to know for overall aesthetic in terms of combining now your artwork with your decor and your furniture and the colors. You know, Richard, is there something that you kind of begin with on your end, or you like to see?
So I'm not sure when the two images other ones that I submitted will come up, but I think they're relevant for the question. I think there are two strategies when, yes, perfect. Yeah. So there are two strategies I've observed in working with interior designers that are placing artwork in a home. This is an example where they had the design with the fabrics and the furnishings, and then they looked for one specific painting to accentuate the space. This is actually Mindy Kaling's residence in Los Angeles. We didn't know that it was her until it came out in Architectural Digest. But the designer worked a lot just to try to find a painting of nature that worked with the color of the draperies and the chairs. The other example, and is it possible for you to put that slide on? Yeah, so this is an example where, in my opinion, this artist's name is Sally Michael, and in my opinion, I know that the client bought this themselves, and I'm suspecting that they had the room designed around the painting, because the palette is almost entirely pulled from the painting. I think it's very successful. And again, it's one, you know, these are both sort of powerful pictures, but really done in service to the overall design space. So that's my observations, and I think that I think it's a great idea to take a favorite work of art and design a room around it. And it's often, you know, something that we talk freely with clients about.
I think this room, in a wonderful way, how it really does riff off of the painting, and even those brown chairs over by the fireplace, that they are a darker color sort of helps bring in the fireplace, because if those two chairs weren't dark, the darkness of the fireplace itself would just be incredibly heavy, and it really makes that whole area more harmonious to have to work with what's there. You know, it's an unlit fireplace. It's wonderful.
One of our main things as well. When you talk about design elements, there's so many fun elements of design for an interior designer or a decorator. But one of the main things that we focus on when we're asked to come and consult in homes is color harmony. And this room that he's done is exactly that. And if you look at any of the ones we've put in of the bed with the painting over it, or the pink cat, yeah. So this one was chosen because she had decorated the room before with this kind of dark teal background, and she asked for a nice painting like that would look like a headboard to be over the top, and Jessie Powell had completed this piece. So we are trying it here because of the color harmonies in the ocean leading out to the wall, and then the dark pillows, and some of the other images you have of the pink couch and the pinks in the painting. We do not match art to furniture. It's just the color harmony that things like that create this exciting design element. Exactly. So these are unframed pieces hung in the middle of existing paneling. They did not need frames because there's already frames in the existing paneling. So these are chosen because they are jovial and fun, and this is a creative room for the client. You know, you're not supposed to buy the painting to match the couch, but if it happens, it's very joyful. And in this case, it just turned out perfectly. And she was happy to get the grays and the greens of the wall in the paintings as well. And so that color harmony made her at one time really happy in her creative space, but also kind of exciting for her to be creative in there. So just another way that art can enhance your room, you know.
And sometimes a client, a person, their vision will be so sort of strong that everything that they pull in to their home is going to somehow work with that.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful thing to see when, and it may not necessarily be a conscious thing, but somehow that they've got their taste, and it everything starts to work together because it's because of the person making the choices, and that can be a really wonderful thing to see.
And that's where they're going to live. And it, like you guys said in the beginning, it reflects them. And that's why art can come full circle and bring back to you what you want. And it's a kind of very interesting and very human in a relationship. Your
Yes.
room and your art.
Right.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about, living spaces and bedroom type spaces, but are there any types of things that we might not have talked about in rooms like your dining room or your kitchen or hallways with art?
I'm a big fan of art in the bathroom. And again, the right art for the right type of bathroom. But I think that sometimes it's nice to have art placed where you don't really expect it, but something that you use a lot. So for example, if your family is going in and out of the mudroom all of the time, you should put something nice there. So I think it's, I think, art should be everywhere, biased. But
There should totally be art in the laundry room.
yeah, exactly.
And, just because your laundry room might be in the basement and it may not be particularly finished, you could still put something pleasing down there. And it may be, maybe a vintage poster under glass, but something, just to bring meaning to the space, to make the workaday world of doing laundry more pleasing. And I think that's important to think about is, just creating joy and meaning and pleasure in life.
You could bring a piece in there that would transport you out of there, such as a
Yes.
big poppy field in France, so that you don't have to be thinking you're doing your laundry, or it's a joy to go do your laundry. I mean, that's the power of art.
Or it could be a 1920s French laundry detergent poster that
Yeah.
was rescued from some wall. So it's about fun and about though thinking of that, I will say I have sometimes been in homes. I go into a lot of homes, and the homes where the art is purchased for its value often don't sing the same way as when art is purchased because a person is in love with it. And that is something, and there are very few, I'm talking like there's been one home that I've been in where the art was purchased for value out of 16 years. And it just, not that many people do it. And in terms of placement, I have been in homes. There's a home I was in northern New Jersey where all the art was in the living room because they were the most important pieces in the collection. But they didn't necessarily go together. So the aesthetic of that room, really, when you got down to it, was the pride that the people had in these objects. It wasn't, so again, like it was about the collection and not about the interiors. And so that was a challenge to photograph because I had to find stories for the page where things are working together and that it tells a story other than value to the viewer of the magazine. And so, yeah, but it's always a wonderful challenge. Every house is a different challenge. So, yes, there.
And if there wasn't anything else to add, I'd love to kind of move to the next topic, which is framing, and talking a bit about that, because I know this is something that can be very important to a collection. You know, there are, especially with older artwork, a lot of times there could be there's the occasion of an original frame, or it's been replaced, and then the new artwork as well. What do you guys, what are some of your thoughts on that? Vanessa, I'd love to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I did mention some things about framing for us. I mean, a frame can make no difference on your art, and especially with modern work, for example, they tend to have very minimalistic, thin frames on work that's kind of abstract, because it's more about the abstraction of the work or the texture, and they don't want the frame distracting from the texture. So that's sometimes why modern work is framed so minimalistically. Other times, such as California Impressionism, like what we sell, maybe the little boat here in the illustration that you've brought up, is tending in the last 100 years to be framed in gold, and usually a nice frame, hand carved, so that it stays in the genre of California Impressionism or American Impressionism. However, recently things have been changing to these black frames with gold fillet, and that has brought their California Impressionist works, maybe not the historical ones, but the contemporary California Impressionist works, more into more homes, because not everybody is traditionally framing and showing works like that in their home, but they want the California Impressionist piece. So framing in that sense, if you frame like this with the California Impressionist piece with gold, it can incorporate it now into a more modern or mixed genre kind of collection. And so that's been happening more and more now. There are some people that still want the fully hand-carved, beautiful Mayan Olson or Rhett Ashby frames, which we all love. But then there's people that want to mix it with a Rauschenberg. So they will choose a simpler framing. So framing really can do a lot for you, or not be important at all. It's quite interesting. Some people love frames in themselves because they are a piece of art in themselves. These people I mentioned, Rhett Ashby and Mayan Olson, hand carved their frames like the old artisans in Italy. And it's a piece of work, an artwork in itself. So, we like to, like I said, mix genres. So we're open to all framing. We don't think anything is kind of too garish or too ornate. It just depends on the work it's with. So hopefully that adds some insight.
So in terms of framing, I think that frame styles tend to change in the same way that interior design styles change.
Mm-hmm.
I agree that, it's really often the work that I think should dictate what the frame is, rather than the frame dictating the work. And I think that like the gold frames work very well in American Impressionism and California Impressionism, but I'm finding now that people are moving away from the sort of ornate gold frames, even with some of their older art, and framing it more contemporary.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that I think is important about framing is that it's not necessarily the style of the molding or the elaborateness, but it's often the proportion of the frame to the image. So so what I love about, the image of the boat with the large frame is just the size of the frame. And I think, again, I think if you're buying art that's, older art or on the secondary market, it might already have a frame on it. The artist might have selected the frame. Oftentimes, contemporary artists will have a big say in what the frame is. So I think, you know, like art, it's different depending on the artist and the collector. But I think you can have a lot of fun with frames. And I agree, not everything needs to be framed. I think it's very successful framing, you know, having, you know, um, stretched canvases in between panels on in a room.
This one here is done like that on purpose. I mean, you couldn't put a frame. It would have taken away from the whole layout in the room with the two chairs. So we just didn't put any frames.
So when I think of a frame is pretty much, I feel, it is signaling to the viewer that this is a different space. You know, that's part of what a frame does. It says this is an artistic space, and it is sort of it can be the go-between between the room and the artwork. And some, as you know, when you just have a gallery frame, just a simple colored strip of wood, it's because the difference between what's going on in the painting, it doesn't need that bridge as much. And so when I am looking at art in a museum, it's sort of speaking, this is a different space. And I think that sort of, it introduces us to the space of the artwork and how do we need to be introduced to the artwork? That's really what a frame does. It's how does it introduce us to what this artwork is about? And how does it make the artwork speak with the room? So, yes.
Yeah, and we do have another question about just your thoughts on cohesive framing, going back to that salon or gallery wall in the home. Is that something that's necessary, or even just all the artwork in your home?
I mean, I tend to be eclectic, so I think I like everything different. That's personal.
Yeah, I don't think they have to match. I do think on a salon wall, when you have so many pieces, it might be more important, you know, if you can have a choice in it. But it's not a, you know, exact science, that answer, because you do want the frame to go with the art most of all. So you're caught between what a gallery and an artist want and what an interior designer wants. And there is a discrepancy often there. The designer wants everything matching and perfect and even, and you know, the gallerist and the artist tend to be like, well, that frame was meant for that piece and you don't want to separate it, so don't put it there, you know. So that's, I think, when problems arise. And again, it will be up to the owner to decide what they want.
And you would hope that that each painting, I'm thinking of paintings because we're talking about frames and gallery hung, that they'll have enough of their own voice that the frames will become less important.
Yeah.
And again, it gets into placement. Would you know, perhaps, yes, what do you put next to what frame? That can also start to, you have to consider that, is how's the harmony of, yes, you want two works to harmonize next to each other on the wall in a gallery space or in any space. But are the frames speaking at all? There might be another piece that will harmonize with that painting in a different frame that harmonizes together with the first painting's frame better. I hope that makes sense. But it's all about harmony. And again, getting back to what Richard had said at the beginning, you know it when you see it. You know, that's part of what a gallery owner, a gallery or an interior designer can help you with is well, to some extent, it can just be about having the courage to experiment. I mean, really, that's what this gets down to. It's like when I'm talking to people, if they're afraid of like pressing like doing something on their computer. I'm like, you can usually undo it, you know? you know, once the nail is in the wall, that's a little different, but it gets down to experimenting. And that's why having things on the floor and working with things on the floor can really help you just
Yeah.
experiment and learn from that. So.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about paintings, and I would love to transition into sculptural works and talk a bit about how those can be incorporated into your home. Richard, do you have any thoughts and kind of starting point? These are just examples to kind of show some different sizes and shapes, and just to let people get a
wonderful Henry Moore sculpture. Sculpture is the perception when one is buying sculpture is that it's a big commitment. And I'm not sure why people feel that way, because to me, it's no more of a commitment than a painting. But there's something about, just the presence of a sculpture that make people feel that way. And so it's always a little bit harder, as a gallery, getting someone over the threshold of buying a sculpture is harder than a painting or a print or a drawing. That said, it can often be the most powerful use of artwork. That if you have a room that, for example, doesn't have any way to hang artwork on a wall, or has lots of light like you see here, sculpture is a fantastic opportunity. One of the things that I think people, back to my putting artwork in bathrooms, if you have, the bathroom that has your shower in it, you can put certain types of sculpture in it without any issues. Ceramics work great. And, we sell a lot of sculpture at the gallery, and it's I love sculpture. But again, I'd be curious what Vanessa's experience is with having people acquire sculpture, because I do think people view it as being more of a permanent or more of a commitment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We had a equestrian show a couple of years ago where we had a local artist do a bunch of bronzes, horse heads that were thin and were easy to place. They did sell a little bit easier than things that were more taking up a 3D space. It's almost like you're committing to a piece of furniture in that sense. But no, I love sculpture. I wish we could carry more. We have such a tiny space. We carry beautiful raw talent, meaning just by Marty Rees, who is a huge bronze sculpturist, and she went to Laguna College of Art and Design. We do well with her works. I absolutely love to create these things called visual vignettes, where I have a little area either on a table or a shelf where it's like a little sculpture, and then behind it is the flat art, so that you're looking at something and you see the play between the two. And there's something about the play between a flat work kind of behind a visual piece that is also interesting to a human being. So I love creating those little vignettes. I think I sent Rochelle a picture where there was a painting, a little book, a little sculpture, and another little painting. And so that's so beautiful for the mind to go there in a room and just kind of enjoy that little space, this little vignette. And so sculpture can really add to it. You can put it on your coffee table. You can put it on your dining room table as a centerpiece with floral around it. I do wish people could incorporate it more into their homes that we see here. It's a special thing, piece of artwork that's a sculpture.
I particularly love the very simple room on the left. That's Lillian Heidenberg's home in Brooklyn, and there's some Henry Moore sculptures and other works by other artists. And I mean, there's an Alex. What you can't see is that on the right-hand wall, there's an Alex Katz painting, a huge one next to the fireplace. But she is letting the sculpture here speak and sing, in that within those panels, she doesn't have other works of art. And the way she integrated the upholstery with wonderful metallic colors with the sculpture is a wonderful integration. And the lower, right picture is of a foundation in Lexington, I think. It's in Kentucky. Wonderful home, and it's now a museum, I do believe. And just it was an amazing home to be in. So yeah, and again with the shelves with all the artwork on there, just all these gems there for a person to look at.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, and kind of continuing on from everything, you know, collections are always changing and moving and growing. You know, a good question I have is, what is your advice for storing artwork, or really, are there outside of the box places that collectors can put artwork to continue displaying things maybe when they think they've run out of space?
We've had collectors that actually know they've really run out of space when they've hung the inside door of all their cabinets. And that's a particularly New England thing. But I think that there's a certain point where, you know, if someone's a really kind of crazed collector, because I feel like collecting is almost like a drug once you get into it, that they'll just keep acquiring even though they can't hang everything. And so there's all kinds of smart storage solutions. If you're someone who collects 2D works on paper, be it prints or drawings, you can get architectural flat files, which are wonderful cabinets that have long drawers that pull out that can be a piece of furniture, and also have an opportunity for you to you know, look at the artwork there. I even recommend, I know people don't, you know, think this is kind of crazy, but buying print racks, you know, antique racks that you can, you know, display your works on paper in, just like you would go into a gallery and see it. There are things that are called Solander boxes. Solander boxes are archival boxes that are black and are attractive in their you know, in their own right, and you can store your artwork in there. But again, you know, as Vanessa suggests, shelves, stacking on bookcases, there's all kinds of creative ways that you can fill your home with art. And I just think, again, you know, just have fun with it.
Vanessa?
So a lot of our collectors actually have seasonal artwork as well. We have people here in Laguna, even though we don't really have seasons. More of our New York clients do this, but they will have in their summer things like the pink couch photo that you saw, very summery paintings. But then when it's time for fall to come around and they're hosting Thanksgiving and Christmas at their home in the dining room paintings will change to be these beautiful winter Russian scenes that we've sold them. And I had to teach her how to put away her other pieces. They actually had a closet in the guest room that they dedicated to work that was going to rotate. So rotating your art is a big thing for some collectors that are, as you say, addicted to purchasing beautiful pieces for their home and their lifestyle. So what we tell them is to make sure that you wrap the painting in a good bubble wrap with the bubbles facing out, because if your painting is an oil painting and it's varnished, those bubbles, if they're facing it, can actually hurt the varnish and leave a mark. So make sure that the flat side is facing the painting and the bubbles are on the outside. In addition to that, you will want to put some cardboard or Bainbridge board around it and then tape it together so that even if it's on a panel that's hard, especially if it is a stretched canvas, you will want something hard around that as well. And then just tape that together. They should always be stored vertically like this, not on top of each other, because it can be damaged. So for example, if you have a thin closet, it's kind of known that you can cut a shelf in it and then store pieces like this vertically, and then down below larger ones. So that is done actually by many of our clients. There's also for people that collect historical work, there are professional places. In California, there's Scott Haskin, who charges a nominal fee to provide a storage place for your painting, whether it's being sold or bought, or you're just in between housing styles. To his place, you can rent a temperature controlled unit there, which is specifically for art. And I'm sure with Google or looking into different articles on the magazines, you can find a place that does these storage solutions. I did want to add to Richard's idea about papers. We created once a large custom leather portfolio, like an artist portfolio with clear pages in it. And that leather book became something that they had on their coffee table. And so when people came over to talk about it and you're having coffee, move the coffee aside, of course, show your prints in this beautiful leather book, as if you were an artist, with a tie strap to it as well. That's something that you can have people make at different shoe shops and things. So getting creative on that would be fun to create an article about that one day, actually. Hope that answers some questions.
Yeah, I think that's great. And there's just 2 additional images in here that I'd love just to talk about briefly, because I think they combine a lot of the things that were mentioned today together in one place. And one of them is a work that Frances shot. So I'll swing this over to Frances to talk quickly about what you see here and just kind of this design element that's happening.
Yeah, this I think is a good example of a salon hung room. And the gentleman who hung this wall, his name is Bram Dijkstra, and he is an art historian. And his wife, Sandy, is a literary agent, and they have an immense collection of American modernism. But Bram, you can see he was thinking about conversations between the works of art here. Particularly, you can see, the frontality of actually more of the side angle of that high tension tower sort of echoes the pose of the nude, and the horizon line on the 2 lower landscapes meets. And then off on its own is that work on paper. And then you've got something very colorful up on top, and it just creates it's both very stimulating and restful at the same time, because it's put together so well. You can put together a lot of things, and if they're put together well, it can still have a calming effect if you want it to.
Yes, and the last image here is from Richard, and this one, it combines so many different items. You see a sculptural piece, there's works hung in many different locations. I'd love for you to just kind of talk a little bit about this, Richard.
So again, this is our apartment, and this is the way that we live with art, meaning it's often leaning against the walls. It's placed all over the place. I mean, the one small image by the sofa is actually of a dog on a pillow, and we actually have the dog bed there. And we're constantly rotating the artwork. The painting over the sofa, I'm actually going to swap out tomorrow. And, being a dealer, sometimes things sell. So, those 2 paintings on the wall have sold now. But if you look to the right by the dining room, there's certain works that will always stay there. And that's an example of a work that we pretty much selected the dining area fabrics to be about. But again, this was a unique project for us, and it was fun. And I hope that everyone at some point gets to design their sort of dream home with art and beautiful furnishings in it. But again, I think it just shows more of an eclectic taste than a sort of particular design aesthetic. But again, you see, we have all different frames. Some are not framed, and you know, again, I would cover all of the walls, but that's pretty much how. Like those placements are still, there's still works there, but that's about all I'm allowed to have.
Well, wonderful. Thank you guys so much today. We have 2 additional questions from our audience, just to kind of get ourselves wrapping up here. One of them is about, what's your advice for hanging artwork in the hallway? It was mentioned about some high traffic areas and using glass in certain places, but is there a height standpoint in terms of placing art? I know just in the image that you all saw from Richard, like some of the pieces were even leaning against the floor and lower to the ground. So what are the parameters there? Is there anything?
Well, one of the, you know, a rule of thumb when you're hanging artwork, and I would say that this would apply in a hallway, is that the center line be basically where your eyes are of an average height person. So 60 to 66 inches is usually, you know, a good center line. I think that, you know, with high traffic areas, it's usually not a good idea to have something, you know, a painting with a fragile surface that you could easily, you know, damage, you know, with a backpack or something like that. But again, I think that, you know, have fun with it.
Yeah, and I think that's just been a common a theme today. And you know, we have one question that's a little bit outside the box, and that's when you purchase an artwork, you know, what happens with the copyright of the artwork? I know being gallery dealers, I'm sure you guys get this question quite a bit. Vanessa, Richard, do either one of you have a response to?
So I'll let you comment also, Vanessa, but the artist always owns the copyright. When you buy a work of art, you're buying the object and not the image. The image is the original conception of the artist, and they own that for a certain number of years after they die. It's called the Mickey Mouse Copyright Act, I think, or something like that. But basically, it's very important that one does not reproduce an artist's image without the specific permission from the artist.
And I'll agree with that. And I have to say that it's sadly done more than we would like it to be done, where an artist has seen that their work is being produced on, you know, book covers or different things without their permission. And it's interesting, you know, it's a different topic, but the NFTs are having something to do with this, where it's, you know, as a creative writer or a creative graphic designer or a creative artist, having the rights to your pieces is, a lot of that has changed lately, but fortunately that copyright to the artist still remains.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that is a good place to wrap up, and thank everybody so much for joining us. And I think you can see, you know, art in your home can be just a wonderful, beautiful experience. And, you know, it's fun. That's, I think, the big takeaway. And your home can become this place where you share your art with other people, you share it with yourselves, and you experience it every day. So Richard, thank you. Vanessa, thank you. And Francis, thank you. I really appreciate your time, and everyone, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you
for
very
having
much.
us.
It's been wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, American Art Collector.
Thank you.